good? Mm-hmm. Ready to go?
Yes.
So, Phil, I love a good love story. There's something so romantic about two people who would do absolutely anything for each other. But what happens when true love becomes true evil? In today's case, I'm going to tell you about two people who would do anything for each other, even kill. This is the story of the Moorhouse Murders. And welcome back to Tell Me Darling, our true crime podcast where I tell my husband Phil true crime stories and he reacts to them. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to reword that so that it doesn't sound exactly like the other podcasts we listen to. But essentially that's what we do, so I'm still working on that. I don't know what else to say.
You say that.
Just say that. Copyright.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. I'll work on it. Work on a little intro. What's new with you?
Nothing. I bought a table.
Tell them about that.
The wife wanted to do Sunday activities and buy a table. So.
Yeah. Well, we've got this, if you're not watching on YouTube and you're on Spotify, we have this big giant coffee table in front of us that I had to have on Facebook Marketplace. It only cost us $500. So cheap. It was such an ordeal to get it here. But we got it and I love it and it looks really great. So there's that. What else? Anything else?
If you got to mention how it was too high for your likings, I had to cut 3 inches off the legs.
We shortened it.
Yeah.
No biggie. Anything else new?
Nah, just busy working.
Well, I cut all my hair off. Thank you so much for noticing. Duh. Thank you.
I noticed when you came home with the haircut.
You want to mention it?
No, that's for you to mention.
Oh, okay. Well, I cut my hair off again. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see it. But if you're not on YouTube, you'll just have to take my word for it. It looks really great. And I don't know. Do you think it looks good?
I know it looks good.
Okay.
Yeah, I love it.
Thank you so much. All right. Anything else you want to add before we get into it?
I can't wait to pull it.
I have no words. Shut up. So our first 3 episodes, you guys will be able to binge because we're going to drop them all at the same time on our Spotify. But we're keeping with theme this week. So it's another Australian true crime story. And that will finish off like the first 3, which I wanted to keep on theme because we're Australian. So that's what today's one is. And then next week we'll have a new one and it's a banger. I already know which one it is. I'm very excited to tell that one. But we're going to tell this one today. And it feels very quiet today, so I'm just going to get into it. Are you ready?
Well, that's what it is. It's story time. So tell me.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right.
The year is 1986 and we're in Perth, Australia. Mm-hmm. Bob Hawke is the Prime Minister. Diana Ross's Chain Reaction was the #1 song. And the second season of Neighbours was airing on TVs across Australia. Wow. Her Majesty, the Queen Elizabeth, and His Royal Highness, the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip, came to Australia for their royal visit. It was the 80s and a great time for many Australians.
I wish I was around in the 80s.
A good time, right?
Yeah.
Would you have rocked a mullet, do you think?
Nah, don't know.
You don't think so?
So would have been a mad dude in the 80s.
Skinny jeans and muscle t-shirts. I feel like that's what the vibe was. Shoulder pads. Sneakers.
I don't know.
You don't know? Okay, good.
I just want to be around in the 80s.
I'll just keep going. Second year of Neighbours also. That's how far... Like, that's how long Neighbours was airing on TV. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, Neighbours is Australian television... great. That's what it is. It's one of the greatest.
Not anymore though. See ya. Okay. Our story begins with a young girl named Mary Nielsen. Mary was a 22-year-old student just 12 months away from graduating with her degree in psychology at the University of Western Australia. She hoped that when she was done with uni, she would be offered a job as a counsellor with the Community Welfare Department. Mary was from a good family with strong roots in the community. Both of her parents were adult education teachers and supported their daughter's pursuit of further education. It's the 6th of October and Mary is enjoying some time home alone while her parents are away on holidays in the UK. Unfortunately, that enjoyment didn't last too long as she ended up having some trouble with the tyres on her car, which she relied upon to get her to and from her classes and her job. So usually her dad would help her out with this, but seeing as he was away, she had to find a way to solve the problem herself. Mary knew about a local spare parts yard, which was only a short drive from her home. She stopped by the yard and met a man by the name of David, who seemed happy to help her out. After explaining the problem with her car, David told her that unfortunately there was nothing in the yard that could help her. However, he had a couple of spares at home that she could buy from him. So he gave Mary his address and told her to come by later that evening after she was finished with work. Mary was glad that she'd found a solution on her own and she headed off to class. That afternoon, she knocked on the door of David's home. She was greeted by a woman named Catherine, who identified herself as David's wife. Catherine was a smiling and friendly-looking woman, and she invited Mary inside to wait for David. This would be where Mary's story takes a turn for the worst. An unsuspecting Mary stepped inside when suddenly the friendly car man from the car yard appeared behind her and held a knife to Mary's throat. She was bound and gagged, and David dragged her through into the main bedroom of the home. He chained her to the bed that he shared with his wife, Catherine. Over the coming hours, Catherine watched while David repeatedly assaulted Mary. She even got involved by asking David questions about what part of the assault was turning him on the most. The next day, they dragged Mary into the back of their vehicle and drove 50 kilometres to the Glen Eagles National Park. After removing her from the car, David put Mary on the ground and assaulted her one last time before tying a nylon cord around her neck and cutting off Mary's ability to breathe. So Mary suffocated and died. David then repeatedly stabbed Mary with a knife because he believed it would help her body decompose faster. David and Catherine then dug a shallow grave and pushed Mary's body inside and covered her with dirt. Then they drove away like nothing happened. So 6 days later, Mary's Mitsubishi Galant was found in a car park along a river. The car park and the river were right outside of the Perth police station, and of course, Mary was nowhere to be found.
What the fuck? That escalated quickly.
Very quickly.
Is that the story done?
You'd think so, but unfortunately not. It's just where we start.
That happened real quick. So what happened? Mary was driving to school.
She had some troubles with her car tyres.
Flat tyre.
It doesn't preface, but she was still able to drive, so maybe it was just going down or something, or wear and tear.
Gone to a mechanic shop or something.
She went to it, yes.
They said they'd fix it.
David said he couldn't fix it in the yard, but he had some tyres at home.
He gave her address. She went there after school.
Yeah.
And crazy.
And 24 hours later, she was dead.
Fuck.
Which is very, like, as you said, it escalated very quickly. Like, that he was casually like, yeah, just come to my house. And then, like, a few hours later, he was tying her to a bed and, like, raping her. Like, that to me feels very premeditated.
Yeah.
Insane. So, who are David and Catherine?
Psychopaths.
Very much so. David Burney, who is 35 years old now in our story, was born on February 15th, 1951 to parents Margaret and John Burney. David was the eldest of 6 children. In his early years, David and his family lived in Wattle Grove, east of Perth. David certainly did not have the best upbringing. His father was quiet, he had a stutter and didn't really converse with a lot of people because they couldn't understand him. There were rumours about incest within the family. His mother, Mrs. Burney, was known to have a bit of a bad mouth. She was a rough woman. She wasn't a good mother. David, as a child, would often appear visibly dirty, like he hadn't been washed or bathed. She would often exchange sexual favours as a term of payment to taxi drivers while the children were in the car. And, like a little
wristy or something.
Sexual favours. But, like, not because, like, she's poor and, like, she's just trying to make ends meet, just because she was, like, literally didn't care about herself and was like, oh, I'll just fuck this dude so I can go to the shop. Like, I don't care. Kind of like she wasn't a good mother. She was careless and she was very reckless.
Wow.
So David's parents had no interest in really taking care of the children either. They would do things like leave the fridge door open so that the kids could come and go as they please and just like take food whenever they were hungry.
Kids just couldn't open the fridge door?
The door would just stay open because their kids were little, like they were young. And they would also do this with their dog. Their dog would just come and eat the food in the fridge. So they
Party
were...
house.
Yeah, it was obviously very dysfunctional, and both of their parents were severe alcoholics. This often resulted in the children being taken away by concerned authority figures. In 1961, David's parents divorced and expected David to look after his siblings, even though he was only 10 at the time.
Wow.
And rather than being out playing and behaving as a child that age should, he felt the heavy pressure of trying to provide for his younger siblings. David left school and began working at the horse racing track at the age of 15, trying to earn an adequate living. However, David was fired for making a sexual remark towards a young woman. From here on, David only found himself in more trouble by constantly committing crimes. Later in life, David got a job selling car parts at a wrecker's yard in Myrie. At work, he maintained the persona of a reliable, intelligent, and happy individual, helping to mask his truly twisted and evil mind. Catherine Burney, who was also 35 years old at the time of our story, was born on the 23rd of May 1951 to parents Doreen and Harold Harrison. When Catherine was just 2 years old... Catherine, you picked that up, bitch. When Catherine was just 2 years old, her mother passed away during childbirth while giving birth to her sibling, resulting in Catherine growing up without a mother figure. Eventually, her father Harold would find Catherine too troublesome for him to handle and would send her back to live with her grandparents. When she was aged 10, a custody battle dispute would take place where her father would regain custody and she would move back in with him.
Grandparents on her mum's side or on his side?
I'm not really sure.
Okay.
This is where she would meet her next door neighbour, David. Catherine was immediately drawn to David and the two of them fell deeply in love. Catherine
From a young age?
They were only 14 at the time.
Uh-huh.
Harold had begged Catherine on several occasions to leave David due to the fact that she was constantly getting in trouble with him, but the disapproval of their relationship only strengthened their union. However, her time in and out of prison throughout her adolescent years offered Catherine the chance to break away from David. Encouraged by a parole officer, Catherine began working for the McLaughlin family as a housekeeper. This is where she would meet Donald McLaughlin on her 21st birthday.
Hold on. So this Catherine chick's been in and out of jail from when she was 14?
Like juvie, like in and out of jail.
Okay.
Yeah, because they kept getting in trouble for like petty crimes.
Uh-huh.
So then obviously she got a parole officer and that parole officer encouraged her to get a job and have a better life.
Yeah.
So she met Donald McLaughlin and on her 21st birthday they got married.
Okay.
So she and McLaughlin had 7 children together.
Oh, shit.
Tragically though, their firstborn son was struck and killed by a car when he was a baby, which is really sad. Catherine's marriage did not last the distance and Catherine started to reminisce about the fun times she shared with David. Deciding to leave her husband just 4 weeks after the birth of her last child, she sought out David and they moved in together,
Oh, wow.
settling in the Perth suburb of Willagee.
So she obviously was with Donald for at least 7 years. They had 7 kids, did you say?
Yeah, 6 to 7 years. Yeah, and she left him like 4 weeks after the birth of their last baby.
Okay.
Yeah. So although they never legally got married, she would go and change her name to Catherine Burney.
That's Dave's last name?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But never, she's still married to the other guy.
What was her maiden name?
Harrison.
Was that Don Harrison or what was it before that?
Doreen and Harold Harrison were her parents.
Oh, okay, yep.
She was Catherine Harrison. And then she got married. And now she's Catherine Burney.
Okay.
Got it?
Mm-hmm.
So back to our story. Just 2 weeks after Mary's murder, David and Catherine would come across 15-year-old Susanna Candy. Susanna was a high school student at Hollywood Senior High in Perth. She lived with her parents, her 2 brothers and a sister. And just like Mary, she came from a good family with her father being one of the top eye surgeons in Australia. Susanna herself was a highly intelligent girl who excelled in her studies at school. She was a responsible and independent girl who liked to make her own way to and from events with her friends. Mm-hmm. So Susanna was hitchhiking along the Stirling Highway in the Claremont area when she came into view of David and Catherine. They pulled over and offered Susanna a ride home. And just like Mary, she seen their friendly smiles as a sign that she would be safe with them, and she got into the car.
No.
But within seconds, a knife was held to her throat and her hands were tied behind her back. David and Catherine drove her back to their home. They dragged Susanna inside and chained her to the master bed, and quite quickly, David began to rape Susanna. When he was done, Catherine got into the bed beside her husband, and Susanna and Catherine got into the bed beside David and Susanna, and to David's delight, she joined in on the abuse. In those moments, the monsters inside both of them were born, and what they had done up until that point was terrible and horrific, but the worst was yet to come.
Hang on, so they were both in the bed.
So David raped Susanna, and then Catherine got in.
And like, was that sexual abuse or was that like
Yeah.
physical abuse?
Sexual.
What the fuck? What's up a fucked up sick couple as that?
It's pretty gross, and like 15, like she's a child.
Is all this? Do they live close to these girls as well? Is it all within the local community, or are
It's
they
all
taking
in-
them from somewhere and then driving way back to wherever they live?
No, it's all within like the local like Perth area, like Perth City. Yeah, it's really sad. So they forced Susanna to write letters to her family telling them that she was going away for a few days to sort herself out. And after both raping her again, David tried to strangle Susanna, but she fought courageously for her life. Susanna didn't want to die. I mean, none of these girls wanted to die, but she fought. So they then forced her to swallow a number of sleeping pills to calm her down. And once she was unconscious, David tied a nylon cord around her neck. But David, being the sick and twisted man that he is, turned to Catherine and said that to prove that she loved him, that she needed to be the one to kill Susanna. Catherine didn't bat an eye, and she slowly tightened the cord until she was sure that Susanna had stopped breathing, while David watched from the other side of the bed. After killing Susanna, they drove back to the state forest. They dug a shallow grave just a stone throws away from where they had buried Mary, and pushed Susanna's remains into the hole. They covered her up and they drove away.
Damn. That's fucked up.
Yeah.
Like couples committing murders together. That's sick.
Yeah. But I just like the fact that she's only 15 to me is really like heavy.
Well, wasn't the other girl only 15 as well?
No, she was 22.
Oh, wasn't she going to school?
University.
Oh, uni, okay.
Yeah, she was only 22, which is still, that's a baby, like, as well. But 15, that's just like something else.
What's up with the name Catherine? Didn't we have one a couple of weeks ago with a lady named Catherine? It was crazy last week, or the first one?
Mm-hmm. Catherine Knight.
Catherine's.
Yeah, Catherine's. Now, you have to remember Susanna was only 15, so when she didn't come home that night, her parents were immediately concerned. It just wasn't like her to disappear, and so they rang the police and reported her missing. However, when they were met with officers, they were told it was most likely that Susanna had run away and she would turn up back when she was good and ready.
They always say that.
Which I hate. I hate that. You know your child. Like, if your child just doesn't come home one night and they're a good kid, like...
You're gonna know.
Yeah, you're going to know. Like, you know,
Yeah.
if she was always a runaway, like, why would they report her missing that night? So 2 days later, Susanna's parents received a letter in the mail that was written in Susanna's handwriting. We know that she was forced to write it, but of course they had no idea. And the letter explained that she had decided to stay with some friends for a few days as she needed time away from home to sort out some problems. The letter was vague and not written how Susanna would usually speak. By then, her parents were already extremely concerned for their daughter's safety, and they felt like the letter provided their fears were justified. But the police took the letter as proof that Susanna was just another teenage runaway, and her family was told to wait until she was ready to come home. They received another similar letter a few days later, and once again they were advised to take it as proof that Susanna was safe and would come home when she was ready. But Susanna would never come home.
What happened while all this was happening? What about the family of the first one?
Well, they're away.
And she didn't have any other friends, family that had thought, hey, we haven't seen our friend in a couple of weeks?
Possibly, but it doesn't mention it though. Yeah. So on the 1st of November, David and Catherine were already out looking for someone new. As David and Catherine pulled up to unsuspecting women around town to chat, they would ask each other if they had the munchies. If either of them said yes, that would be their code word for who they wanted to kidnap next. If either of them said no, then they would simply move on. The pair were driving down the Canning Highway in East Fremantle when they spotted a woman leaning against her car. That woman was Noleen Patterson. Noleen was a 31-year-old bar manager who lived with her mum in an upmarket suburb of Perth. Noleen hadn't always worked in bars. In fact, she preferred serving drinks in the sky. She had worked as an air hostess for Ansett Airlines for 9 years prior to returning home and getting a job as a bar manager at a local golf club. Noleen had a way with people. No matter their age or background, she would find something in common and make them feel like they were special. At the golf club, regulars came to know her by name and they described her as a charming and polite woman. Noleen was also an attractive woman with grace and poise typical of an air hostess in that era.
Mm-hmm.
When David and Catherine spotted her from afar, they could see that the woman was beautiful, but up close, immediately they noticed her elegance and graceful movements. And Catherine hated her from the moment she saw her.
A little bit jealous.
Yeah, Noleen was everything that she wasn't. She was poised and well put together and just naturally beautiful.
So all Catherine had to say is she didn't have the munchies?
Basically, yeah. So David, on the other hand, couldn't get enough of Noleen. So Catherine recognised the immediate flame of lust that lit up in his eyes when he looked the woman up and down. But she urged David to keep going and that they should find someone else. But David was like, no, I have to have Noleen. And so he broke the rules, the munchie rule.
Oh, so she didn't want, that's right, she didn't want to, but David wanted it. Okay.
Yeah, but he said no.
Yeah.
So when they pulled over, Noleen leaned into the window of their car and told them that she had run out of petrol and asked if they could take her to a nearby gas station. They willingly obliged, but the second the door closed behind her, Catherine had a knife to her throat. And just like Susanna, she was tied up and told not to make a noise or move. If she didn't do what they said, they threatened to stab her.
Damn. What type of car are these guys doing this in? Do we know?
Oh, it was, I know this. I'm so sorry. Sorry.
I just want to know what type of car they're using.
Yeah. It's
so it's in the 80s, mid-80s, 85, is it? 86?
1986.
Okay, what have they got around then? The cars still aren't that old school anymore. What was it? Ford, Holden?
I couldn't tell you. I'm really sorry. I feel bad. It didn't say in any of the articles that I read, actually, because otherwise I would have written it down.
Then how do you say you know this?
Because I've seen the video. I watched a video.
Okay.
Yeah. But, I mean, it could have just been a guess.
Let's come back. We'll write it in the caption somewhere.
Thank you so much. And also...
Was there cameras around back then?
No, not like they are today.
Okay.
No cameras.
All right.
But also, even if there were cameras, nobody knows that this is happening. They're getting away with it every time. Mm-hmm. There's no alarm bells ringing yet. No one's asking questions.
Okay.
Yeah. So Catherine and David drove home and dragged Noleen into the house, and once again she was taken to the master bedroom. She was chained to the bed and a gag was put in her mouth, and David wasted no time and immediately began to assault Noleen. Catherine noticed a difference in David with Noleen. He seemed to be enjoying his time with her much more than the previous two women, and sure, it was violent and horrific just like the others had been, but David was reaching a whole new level of ecstasy that drove Catherine wild. Before they had selected Noleen, they had agreed to treat their next victim the same as the others, abduct them, rape them, kill them, all in the same day. So Catherine was feeling increasingly jealous as she watched David take his time with Noleen. When it came time for David to kill Noleen that night, he refused to do it.
Oh.
He kept telling Catherine, just one more time, just let me have her one more time. And when the first night stretched into the next day and then another, Catherine felt like David had actually fallen for Noleen. It was like
crazy.
Catherine was nothing to him anymore, and she felt she had to do something to put an end to his infatuation. On the third day of Noleen being tied to the bed and repeatedly raped, Catherine told David that if he didn't kill her immediately, Catherine was going to slit her own throat in front of him. She gave David an ultimatum.
Damn.
Noleen or me. Hectic.
See you later, Catherine.
Oh, could you imagine?
Kill yourself.
Oh my God, if only. So that night, David forced sleeping pills down Noleen's throat, and as she slept, he strangled her while Catherine watched on.
Oh.
Satisfied that David had chosen her, once again the couple drove out to the same state forest where Susanna and Mary were buried. They dug a shallow grave, and Catherine excitedly threw dirt and sand over Noleen's perfectly peaceful face.
Damn.
As they drove away, Catherine stewed over the last 3 days and what had happened with Noleen. She was determined to find their next victim quickly so that they could put the memory of Noleen far behind them. She promised herself she wouldn't let David fall for any of their future victims again. She was going to be much more careful next time, no more beautiful women who could steal her husband's affections. Anything to add though?
Nah, they just sound crazy, just fucked up.
Yeah.
What's their motive with all this? Do we know a motive, or do we get to that later?
It's just a game.
So like they're just obviously they're not all there. They've done it once, got away with it, and just thought, hey, we can do this.
Well, that's the question. Like, is this the first time they've done it? Because they've gone 1, 2, 3, 4, like really quickly. You know what I mean? Like, they're not wasting any time between. Whereas, like, so I feel like someone who did this for the first time wouldn't do it again as quickly.
So
Like,
have they done it before, but no one knows about?
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, it just feels like, you know. Anyway.
Yeah. So there's no motive. It's just game. They're sick.
They're just sick, yeah. So the day after burying Noleen, Catherine spotted their next victim, 21-year-old Denise Brown, who was waiting at a bus stop on the Stirling Highway. She was alone and she was pretty, but to Catherine she just wasn't Noleen, not in comparison. Denise Brown was a 21-year-old woman working as a computer operator in Perth. Like many women her age, she spent her evenings and weekends enjoying the nightlife that the city had to offer. She was a sociable and easygoing girl with lots of friends. Denise was a trusting young woman and she was always the first person to help out if someone was in need. Denise shared a flat with her boyfriend and another couple that they were both close with. After a couple of hours and a few drinks, Denise said goodbye to her friend and was walking to the nearby bus stop on Stirling Highway. It was a nice night and the bus would only take a few minutes to deliver her home. But when a friendly middle-aged couple pulled up in a nice car and offered her a ride, Denise willingly accepted.
What's the nice car?
I know, it's going to bug me so much. And just like the others before her, as soon as Denise entered the vehicle, a knife was held to her throat and she was told not to make a noise or she would be stabbed to death. She was taken to the house and, well, you know what happened next. She was repeatedly raped by both Catherine and David. It was the next day after a long, painful night for Denise. David and Catherine forced her to ring a friend and tell her that she was fine, which is so sick. So sick.
I would just say, if that was me, I would just literally tell the friend. I would just scream, help me, you know.
I think people's like fight or flight just kick in a different way. Like some people would do that and just be like, I'm not okay. Or like, you know what I mean? They'd scream. But some people are just so scared and probably would never imagine that they would actually get murdered. And they would just think that if they did everything that they said, that they would end up okay. But if you listen to true crime, you know that's not true. And you just fight. You always fight. If they say that they're going to stab you, you fight, because they're probably going to stab you anyway.
Hang on, you fight or flight?
You fight.
So yeah, that's what I'm saying. I would be like,
Yeah, you would, but
kidnap,
I'm saying
blue
not.
car. That's
not,
fighting.
Yeah,
Flight would be going with the flow. I'm okay.
which is what I just said. Some
Oh.
people's fight or flight.
Yeah.
There is an or between. Don't come at me. So they're so scared that they're just doing what they're told. They're
Yeah.
only like young girls.
Yeah.
And if you don't know any better or listen to true crime, you are naive and probably think that they are going to let you go if you just do what they say. But they won't. That's what I've learned listening to true crime. Anyway, so the following day, after forcing her to swallow sleeping pills, Catherine and David bundled Denise into the car and drove off into the sunset. But this is no fairy tale. This is a horror story. And with Denise, they decided to find a new spot to bury her and they drove toward the Wanneroo Pine Plantation. Along the way, they spotted a hitchhiker, another young woman. Denise was sedated and slumped over in the back seat of the car, and yet they thought it was a great time to move on to their next victim.
Oh, idiots. This is where they get caught for sure.
Catherine and David pulled up next to a 19-year-old student and offered her a ride. But the girl felt uneasy. She didn't recognize the car. She noticed there was a man driving and the man kept looking down and wouldn't make eye contact with her. And she also noticed that Catherine was drinking a can of UDL rum and it was early in the morning.
UDL rum.
UDL rum and coke.
UDLs. I didn't think UDLs were rum and coke. Anyway.
So it was early in the morning, so that's weird. Like, why are you drinking? With all of the voices inside her head saying no and alarm bells ringing, the girl politely said, no, I only
Hang
live
on.
up the road.
You just said they drove off into the sunset.
With Denise in the back, as in they're going to bury her.
Yeah, but now it's the next morning. Have they been driving all night or something?
I think that's just a figure of speech, like fairy tale. They
Oh,
drove off
okay.
into the sun, they're
So-
on ecstasy, they're on a high, they love what they're doing. This is like fun for them.
So, okay, so now, because I'm thinking it's nighttime, they're going to bury her at nighttime.
I confused you.
You
I
did
just
confuse
said
me.
it is the next morning.
Okay.
Okay. So she said no. She said, no, I only live up the road. Like, it's fine. The girl looked into the back seat where she saw a small person with short brown hair lying across the seat. She thought it must have been their son or their daughter asleep in the back, and she told them again she didn't want to lift because like walking was good exercise. The man looked up for the first time and gazed at her before looking away again. By this time more cars had appeared and she started to walk away, but they continued to sit in the car, so she walked a little bit faster, and finally the car started and they did a U-turn and they drove away.
Okay.
So the girls' rejection was disappointing to Catherine and David, but they still had business to take care of. And I mean, Denise is literally alive in the back
Good
seat.
on, like, not good on, that sounds bad to say, but
There
she
was-
made the right decision, that girl, to not
like
be in the
trust your gut. There was definitely someone looking out for her that day. So while they waited for the day to press on and the sun to go down, David raped Denise again in the back of the car. When he was done and the sun had finally disappeared, he took out a knife and stabbed Denise in the neck. Catherine told David that she wasn't sure one cut was enough and went and grabbed a bigger knife from the car and offered it to David. He was about to stab Denise again, but it looked like that she had died, so he put the knife down. They left her to bleed on the ground while they dug a shallow grave. Then they dragged her into the hole and was about to cover her with dirt when suddenly Denise sat bolt upright. The single stab wound to the neck had not killed her, and what happened next was terrifying. David grabbed his axe and hit Denise in the head with the flat side of the blade. But when that didn't kill Denise, David turned the axe around over and hit her on the head with the blade of the axe. And this time they were sure Denise was dead. They covered her body with dirt and they drove off. So by now, rumours about a killer on the loose were beginning to spring up in Perth. When Denise was reported missing, a detective realised that 4 women had gone missing from the same area in just 27 days. These kinds of numbers were just unheard of in what was still a relatively quiet city compared to the likes of Sydney or Melbourne. So even though officers had tried to convince Susanna's family that she was a runaway and Mary's family that she was old enough to look after herself, it just didn't make sense that 4 women from good families with no history of taking off would all go missing in such a short period of time. On top of that, none of the women appeared to have any connection to each other. There was a strange aspect to 2 of the disappearances that detectives just couldn't understand. Susanna had sent 2 letters to her family and Denise had called a friend to say that she was fine. By the time detectives were connecting the disappearances of their victims, David and Catherine's appetite for rape and murder had reached a fever pitch. They were almost in a frenzy and their hunger insatiable. On the 9th of November, just 4 days after murdering Denise, David and Catherine would come across Katie Moore. Katie was a 17-year-old girl with her whole life ahead of her. She came from a good family and was kind and intelligent. She had plenty of friends, and while they liked to drink and party, Kate didn't like alcohol and was happy to enjoy their company completely sober. Kate was walking home from the pub when a friendly middle-aged couple in a nice vehicle that we do not know what it is pulled over and asked her for directions. Kate tried to help the couple find where they were going, and she leant into the window of the car. And when she leant into the window, of course, a knife was put to her throat and she was told to do as the couple said or they would kill her. Kate followed their instructions and got into the back of the car. She was immediately scared for her life and she asked the couple, who we know as Catherine and David, if they were going to rape and kill her, to which they replied, "We'll only rape you if you're good." So, like, I can see why they didn't fight back, because they just, like, assumed that they would be let go. Which is really sad. They drove to their house of horrors and dragged Kate inside the front door. Once she was firmly restrained, David ripped her clothes off and chained her hands and feet to the bed. David took the lead once again and raped her repeatedly while Catherine watched on. Katie overheard them talking about injecting cocaine into David's penis in order to give him more of a high. Is that even a thing?
Is that why you're asking me? Fuck, I
don't know. You've got a penis. No? Okay.
No.
That night, they made Kate dance to music and they set up the television to watch the Rocky Horror Picture Show together. Katie considered that the couple might be thinking about killing her, but she knew for sure that that was her fate when she saw David and Catherine watching a news story about the recent spate of young women disappearing in the area. David and Catherine laughed at the story and shared a chilling look. In that moment, Katie realised that she wasn't the first and the couple had no intention of letting her go. So the next morning, David left for work.
Well, hold up. So they've taken her home. They've done what they've done, but they haven't killed her straight away yet.
No, they didn't. Yeah. I think because they picked her up at night time. So maybe to them it wasn't enough time. Like they usually spent like a few hours. So the next morning, David left for work, and Catherine held a knife to Katie's throat and unchained her from the bed. She walked Katie to the living room and made her ring her mother to tell her that she was okay and not to come looking for her. Katie told her mum that she had gone out with a friend and had too much to drink, and so she was going to stay at her friend's place for a few days. She hoped that her mum would connect the dots and come to rescue her. Her mum was well aware that Katie didn't drink and that she had the number of Katie's friend that she said that she was staying with.
Yeah.
And she prayed that her mum would call the friend to find out what was really going on and realise that something bad had happened to her daughter.
Do we know if Mama Bear did that?
She did not. When Katie was done with the phone call, Catherine allowed her to watch television when there was a knock at the front door. Catherine quickly moved Katie back to the bedroom but didn't retie her. The man at the front door was David and Catherine's dealer who had come to sell them some cannabis. Katie sensed that those few moments where Catherine was out of the room might be her only opportunity to escape.
Run, bitch.
She looked around and saw a window that she knew she could fit through, and she jumped through the window. Fueled with adrenaline, Katie sprung back onto her feet and she ran down the street. She tried wildly knocking on some of the doors of the homes on the street. Yeah, she's out. But there was no answer, and Katie knew by now that Catherine had probably figured out she was gone and would soon come looking for her. And who knew what Catherine was capable of? She continued down the street and up the laneway, and finally, after what felt like an eternity, Katie spotted an open store and ran in the front door. She was frantic, and she told the shop owner that she had been raped and to please call the police. When officers arrived, they couldn't believe what Katie was saying. The 17-year-old in front of them was barefoot and wearing barely anything. Her hair was wild, and obviously her pupils were huge.
Actually, they couldn't believe that, hey, we've possibly got our people, or they just didn't believe this.
They just couldn't believe the story that they were telling her, because this just didn't really happen in Perth. They doubted her story.
It's been happening for the last couple of weeks.
But they don't know that yet. They don't know where Susanna, Denise or Noleen are. They don't know that they've been raped and murdered. They just think that they've taken off.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought the news article was saying there's possible serial killers out there.
No, it just said that people have been going missing.
Oh, okay.
3 girls, yeah. But they hadn't connected those yet. So what she claimed to have gone through was so unheard of in their little corner of the world that quite frankly they didn't believe a word that she had to say. They transferred Katie to the station where the commanding officer told his junior to stitch her up for a false report.
Damn police.
So they didn't believe her at all. But thankfully, the officer on duty that day thought that Katie was telling the truth. Laura Hancock was a junior constable who had just graduated from her training, and it was her first time taking a statement. After hearing Katie's story in full, there was no doubt in Laura's mind that what she had said was true. The level of detail she provided was so specific that it just didn't make sense that she would have made it up. Katie knew the name of one of her attackers, even though they had given her false names. It turns out that she had read David's name on a medicine bottle. She also knew their phone number, which she had memorized from the handset when she was told to call her mum.
Yeah.
But that wasn't all. Katie was a smart young woman, and maybe she had a sense that if she ever got free from the house, people might not believe her story, or the couple would deny what they had done. She told Laura that during her imprisonment, she had left items in specific places as evidence around the house. Katie told police that she had asked Catherine for a note pen and a paper to write her boyfriend a goodbye letter because she knew this would be the last chance she had to leave messages and notes for them. But these were no ordinary notes. Katie and her boyfriend had devised a secret code for communicating with each other. So Katie makes a note of the Bernies' phone number and writes it down in this code. Katie also managed to bargain with the Bernies to untie her during her captivity. Whenever Catherine would leave the room where Katie was being held, she would hide some of her personal items. At this point during her stay, Katie was convinced that these would be the final moments of her life, and she wanted to make sure that if ever someone came looking for her, that they would find something to tie her to this house and to the Bernies. She hid her driver's license by the stove and other personal items around the house. When Laura told her commanding officer that she believed Katie, they were doubtful until she revealed one key factor. What do you think it is?
Don't know, the news, when they were watching the news article and they looked at each other.
No. The girl, Katie, had been forced to call her mum and tell her that she was safe. And with that, the simple comment, the connection was drawn to the two other missing person cases where the victims had contacted their families to say that they were safe. The morning after Katie's escape, officers entered the Bernies' home with a search warrant. It was clear that the couple had tried to cover up any sign that Kate had ever been in the house, and they denied ever having met her. But everything Kate had said about the house rang true. The Rocky Horror tape was still in the VCR, just as Kate had said. Officers found letters which Kate had written to her family, as well as the picture she had drawn and tucked under the couch for her boyfriend. Her lipstick was shoved down in between the cushions of the sofa, and a pack of cigarettes Katie had stashed inside the ceiling.
So were they Catherine and old mate home when the police... how did it all come about? So they got the statement, did they just head straight down there? Did they have to
No, David was at work, and I believe that they staked, like they waited outside the house, and then when Catherine came home, they approached her, and they went inside the house, and she was really aggressive, like from the onset. So Katie had stashed inside the ceiling a packet of cigarettes as well, which they had found, and the sleeping pills that Katie had pretended to swallow but spat out were on the floor beside the bed.
Oh, smart chick, so she didn't actually take them.
No, she didn't.
Yeah.
So the evidence Katie had left behind was undeniable. Catherine and David were taken to the station for interrogation. After hours of questioning, David finally cracked and revealed that not only was everything Katie said true, but he also admitted to 4 other victims. He led the police to the graves of Mary, Susanna, Noleen, and Denise. Katie was the only victim to survive the killing spree, which came to be known as the Moorhouse Murders due to the address of the house being on Moorhouse Street.
What was Katie's last name? Moore as well?
Moore. Well, but it's spelt different.
Okay.
It could be Maya.
Yeah.
But I didn't actually find any video of people saying her last name.
Okay.
So I think it is Moore.
So it's not got to do with her last name? It was on Moorhouse Street.
It's on Moorhouse Street, yeah.
Wow, so after all that, he obviously got caught, and he gave it all up.
He just gave it up. But like they knew that these girls were missing, so he probably just like was backed into a
bet
corner.
he would have been big mad when he, went to work not thinking that Catherine's gonna let their prisoner go, and didn't really let her go. But
she really let her go. Katie was like, "Not today, bitch," and got out of there.
Yeah.
Like she fought. So David and Catherine both pled guilty to 4 counts of willful murder, 1 count of deprivation of liberty, and 2 counts of aggravated sexual assault. As David and Catherine left the courthouse in police custody, they were met with an angry crowd. The people of Perth were outraged. They were disgusted. They hated Catherine and David, and rightfully so. They yelled things like, "Hang you bloody bastard," and "Die you mongrel." Yeah. There's actually video of David walking from the courthouse to like the police van, I guess, and people are yelling through the fence. Like they're so angry, and he blows a kiss to them.
Scum.
Yeah, his face is so punchable. So David is sentenced to life in prison under strict security, and he really needed it because even though he's in jail, the other prisoners hated David. They hated him for his crimes, and they hated him for what he did, and they bashed him all the time.
So he did get bashed in jail?
Yeah, a lot. So he had to go into strict security. Catherine was also sentenced to life in prison, and even though the pair were convicted for all 4 murders, police were convinced that the pair more than likely had done this before, but there would never be justice for those victims because they would deny it. David would deny any other victims or involvement in any other missing persons cases. But the Perth police don't believe that this was their first crime. Damn. They just said it's just too graphic, too violent, too much, too soon for it to be the first crime or murder. So on the 7th of October 2005, at the age of 54, David was found dead after hanging himself in his cell.
Oh.
The journey to recovery has been long for Katie Moore, Every 3 years since Catherine became eligible for parole, Katie has had to relive the trauma of her experience in order to front up to the parole board and advocate for Catherine to remain incarcerated. In 2007, Catherine unsuccessfully applied for parole, in part thanks to Katie's recounting of the crimes against her and the other victims who did not survive.
Yeah.
Catherine was due to become eligible for parole in 2010, but the Attorney General bowed to public pressure and determined that she would never be set free. Whilst this was the outcome Katie had fought so hard for, she felt that hers was just one fight in a system which prioritised the rights of offenders over victims and their families. She became a campaigner for the parole reform, and in 2018 she successfully fronted a bill which meant that any criminal charged with more than 3 murders in one trial would never be eligible for parole.
Good.
Catherine is now 72 and is still serving her life sentence in prison. And that was the story of the Moorhouse Murders.
Oh, damn. Crazy motherfuckers.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
In such a short time period. This happened between October and November. 2 months period.
And how many total victims? 4.
Well, 5. Katie's still a victim.
Yeah, so,
but 4 lost their lives.
Yep.
And the youngest being 15 is really sad. And Noleen was 31, which is my age.
No, wasn't Noleen 39?
31.
Oh, 31, okay.
Yeah, she was 31.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's hectic.
It is.
Still, every week I think, and I still can't end up believing it. And it just sucks. It's like it's happened here in Australia.
Yeah.
You don't think it, but it's going to happen.
This was definitely like an infamous crime in Australia. It was big news.
Yeah. It's just crazy that I hadn't heard of them like that. Or maybe I have, but don't remember. That Catherine Knight one.
Yeah.
What was the other one?
The Sundown Murders, which is what we did last week.
What were they?
The Family.
Oh, yeah, the ones that we were traveling.
But that one was actually quite not as common. I think because it happened so long ago, there was really not a lot of info. But this one, there was a lot about, Catherine and David and who they were and just that they were shit people, basically. There's not a lot about Katie and where she is now, but I think that's just due to privacy and, she obviously doesn't want that to be her legacy in her life, but she has done a lot for the parole stuff with prison.
Yeah, well, that's good.
Yeah. Anyway, that was today's episode. Really heavy. And that's the end of our 3-part binge Australian true crime series. You guys will get all of those in one go. How exciting. So
where are we going to next week?
We are going to America next week. USA, which I'm sure we'll spend a lot of time in the USA because they're crazy. They're crazy over there.
Yeah.
So make sure you guys leave us a review on our Spotify and subscribe to all of our socials. Send us a DM if you want to chat, if you have any suggestions. I think, well, maybe not next week, the week after, you might start reading reviews.
I can't read.
Okay, cool. Well, I think that's it.
Yep.
Awesome. We will catch you next week.
See ya.
Bye.